That quieted everybody down, Steve. Take it away.
Our opening words this morning come from the Jewish Voices for Peace Haggadah. Freedom and slavery, liberation and oppression are both always present and always possible. We arrive at the Passover table breathless, with the salty taste of authoritarian racism ripe on our tongues. We arrive at the Passover table full of awe, with the rise of grassroots popular movements insisting on connection across borders and walls. We arrive strong and grateful for one another, for our ever-growing movement for justice and liberation. In the words of the poet and activist Aurora Levins Morales, this time we cannot cross until we carry each other. All of us refugees, all of us prophets. No more taking turns on history's wheel, trying to collect old debts no one can pay. The sea will not open that way. This time, that country is what we promise each other. Our rage pressed cheek to cheek until tears flood the space between, until there are no enemies left. Because this time, no one will be left to drown, and all of us must be chosen. This time, it's all of us, or none.
Good morning, everybody. We're all in our places with bright, shiny faces. Good morning to you. This is a good time for everybody to wave. Wave. It works. Unbelievable. At our Elm Street entrance, there is a large poster that has one of Jack Mendelssohn's favorite biblical quotations. It says, "Welcome to the wild asses, as mentioned in the 39th chapter of Job, who search the barren wilderness, seeking every green thing." I hope that some of you have some green things around you this morning. Today is Palm Sunday, and I have an aspidistra sitting in here for a palm today. This is the beginning of Holy Week for Christians. Passover begins on Wednesday evening, and every Palm Sunday, I call attention to the painting that is on the bottom of our sanctuary clock. Now turn around and look at the sanctuary clock. Yeah, at least some of you are turning around to look at the sanctuary clock. There is a painting of the triumphal entry into Jerusalem by Jesus, and that painting has been there since 1817. This week, there will also be a special service on Good Friday at 7 p.m. It is so good for us to be together. I know that some of us are able to go outside to work in the yard or garden or exercise, and others cannot. Others are quarantined to their home or even to a single room. And I know of at least 4 of our parishioners who are in prison. And so here we are this morning, and all of us are together in the spirit of love. If you are new, I do encourage you to go to our website and look for the contact tab, and you can let us know who you are so that you can stay in touch with what goes on here. And while you're at it, go look at the calendar, because there are an amazing variety of things happening virtually at First Parish, and many of them are public, but going to the calendar is the way to get Zoom links for any and all of them. I'm told, just for example, that even this morning, there were 11 kids present for the Spirit Play program. And so our religious education program and other programs are just continuing full speed ahead. Let's see. Corinne Dowd and Renu Bostwick asked me to make this announcement. UU Mass Action's priority for the April 14th UU Advocacy Day includes the COVID-19 emergency legislation and UU Mass Action priority legislation. Information about RSVPing for the virtual April 14 UU Advocacy Day is in the parishioner and will be sent to the church email list. All are welcome to join the program. Materials for advocacy are only available to those who register. Please help out UU Mass Action and register by Tuesday, April 7th. And I also want to include in our announcements the brand new, hot off the presses publication of Sharon McDonald's newest book, which is titled Bedford History for Kids. This book is about, well, I guess the title probably tells you what this book is about. And it is available in bookstores, which are closed. But, you know, Sharon McDonald is willing to deliver books. So give Sharon an email or a call, and you'll figure out some way to get a copy, as I figured out a way to get a copy yesterday. It's great. It's a wonderful thing to have. Congratulations to Sharon. And I think at this point in our program, it is time for you to stand as you are able, and we will join together in our unison affirmation. Together. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en el amor y ayudarnos los unos a los otros. Welcome, everyone. It's good to be together.
So this morning we have a short cartoon video to tell the story that will be at the center of today's worship service. It's a story I bet many of you already know. And this telling is done by an evangelical megachurch because, as it turns out, that's who makes YouTube videos of Bible stories. But I think that while the theology we hold and the theology of the folks making the video may not align perfectly, it is a cute retelling of a story we will delve into more deeply throughout the service.
This is Moses, who was an Israelite born in Egypt in a time when Israelite boys were not supposed to live.
Wait, huh?
Moses, however, grew up in the palace of the Pharaoh, the very man who was enslaving the Israelite people. When Moses grew up, he made a big mistake.
Uh-oh.
So Moses ran away from Egypt to the land of Midian. After many years, an angel of the Lord appeared to Moses and told him to go back to Egypt to free the Israelites. After much protesting, God granted Moses his brother Aaron to speak on his behalf. So Moses went to Egypt.
Yeah, move there.
And on his way there, he met Aaron, who was ready to do whatever God wanted him to do. The Israelites were slaves to the Egyptians, but God had a special plan for Moses.
Hey, everyone,
After rallying God's people to them, Moses and Aaron went to the Pharaoh. And said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, has said. Let my people go." And Pharaoh made the Israelites work harder because of this.
Hey, how are you? Huh?
The foremen of the Israelite slaves were angry with Moses and Aaron for causing this trouble. So Moses cried out to God and asked why this was happening. But God said, "You will see what I will do. I am the Lord. I will deliver you from slavery."
Wow, okay. Hey!
Moses told this to the people,
Hey!
but they were so discouraged that they didn't listen to him.
Yeah, whatever.
God told Moses to go to Pharaoh and to do exactly as he said. So Moses and Aaron went to the Pharaoh.
Hey!
God told them to take the staff and throw it down before Pharaoh.
Huh?
Pharaoh was not impressed. He called his wise men and sorcerers, and they did the same thing. But Aaron's staff swallowed up the sorcerer's staff. Yet Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen to them.
Shoot.
Just as God had said. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to the banks of the Nile River and meet Pharaoh."
Hey, Pharaoh! Oh, man!
Moses and Aaron did just as God had said. But again, Pharaoh's magicians did the same miracle, and Pharaoh refused to let God's people go. So God sent 9 more plagues to Egypt to show his power. Even with all the suffering, Pharaoh's heart stayed hard and he would not let the people go. On the night of the last plague, Pharaoh woke up and heard a great cry in Egypt.
Oh, no.
For there was not a house in Egypt where someone was not dead. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and told him to be gone with the Israelites. So the Israelites left Egypt immediately and made their way to the Promised Land, taking with them many riches from Egypt, and they took Joseph's bones as they had promised him many years before. But after they had gone, Pharaoh changed his mind and readied his army to take back the Israelites. When the Israelites saw Pharaoh and his armies come, they were terrified. But God made a way for them. Through all of this, the Israelites saw the great power of their God, the one true God, and they put their trust in Moses, his servant.
So while that video is a very modern telling, this story about Moses and Pharaoh and escaping Egypt is a very ancient story. Some scholars believe that parts of it were written down as early as 950 years before the Common Era, almost 1,000 years before Jesus was born. This was a story that was passed along orally before it was ever written down, and multiple versions were combined together to make the text that Jews and Christians use today. This story was one of the ways that the people of the kingdoms of Israel and Judah made meaning out of their existence. They were relatively small tribes, and they were surrounded by larger and stronger groups. They felt proud of their people and their culture, and also scared of being taken over. They were struggling to figure out what was fair and what was right and how society should be run. And this story was one way they reminded each other of who they were and what was important to them. This ancient story is the story that Jewish people all over the world will be telling when Passover starts on the 8th. While Jews in our communities cannot gather with loved ones to share the ritual meal in the usual way, I know there will be seders on Zoom, as well as many other creative initiatives. Jewish people have been telling this story for generations upon generations, sitting down to Seder in times of fear and oppression, war and migration, returning to it again and again. This story has also been very important to African Americans in our country. Some enslaved Africans and their descendants learned this story from the white folks who kept them enslaved, and it became an important piece of their own religious experience of resilience and resistance. It remained important during the civil rights movement. In fact, the text I used as our thought to ponder on Martin Luther King Day in January mentioned getting out of Egypt. In other words, getting free. And it's a complicated story, and we will talk more about that. But to begin with, I just wanted to remind us where the story comes from and how it has been used. Remind us that this story, like all of our sacred stories, is the result of people making meaning of their lives, reminding their communities of their identity and values, working through complicated issues in uncertain times. So this piece of music we'll be hearing will be very familiar to all of the choir members who were preparing to sing it at this service when we believed this service would be gathered in person. This piece, Va Pensiero, is from an opera, Nabucco, which recounts the Babylonian captivity, another period of great loss, disorientation, and hardship for the people of Israel. And this piece is also known as the Chorus of the Hebrew Slaves. And it was prepared by our choir with Brad leading that to sing today. But this version we'll be seeing is a version very much appropriate for our times, as you will see once it begins. Thank you so much to Brad for finding that video that fits so perfectly with so many of the themes, as well as with what had originally been prepared by the choir. And I saw a note that Cynthia Mork was singing along, and maybe other choir members were as well. So as I mentioned, the story of the Exodus is a complicated story. And in some ways, it is the simplicity of the story that makes it complex. Because in this story, there are good guys and bad guys. Team Pharaoh, Team Moses. And we know who we're supposed to root for. But what about the Egyptian citizens who lost their crops to the locusts, their homes filled with frogs, sick from drinking blood water, losing their firstborn child? Must liberation also mean so much suffering and so much loss? When I hear this story, I want to be on Team Moses, but I often wonder if I'm not more like one of the regular Egyptians, benefiting from the slavery indirectly. When I think of the Pharaoh, I imagine our president's face. When I think of the oppressed Israelites, I think of my community members in immigration jail. And sometimes I have found myself wondering recently, did we deserve this? Did we bring it upon ourselves? Was this pandemic sent so we would stop business as usual and find a new way? Could this plague get some people out of Egypt? But when these thoughts arise, I always come back to a clear truth. I don't believe in a God who uses human suffering to get their way. There is possibility in this pandemic, but the virus is not divine. It is a random biological phenomenon, and it is killing people. However, we are a meaning-making people, like all people, who tell stories and make sense of loss. And here we are, disoriented, lost, confused, suffering, scared, a little like the Egyptians facing plagues, a little like the Israelites in the midst of a parted Red Sea with no idea what comes next. Aurora Levins Morales says, "This time we cannot cross until we carry each other. All of us refugees, all of us prophets. This time no one will be left to drown, and all of us must be chosen. This time it's all of us or none. This time we cannot cross the Red Sea until we carry each other." Can you picture that? No water closing in to drown the Egyptian army, but instead collective liberation. So my question to you is, what does it look like to get free together in these times? And where are you already seeing people carrying each other during this pandemic? How are we going to get through?
For the offering, the offertory, Ben and I are going to sing Building a New Way. It's a hymn that a lot of you might not know, but it's very catchy. And what we're going to do is what we did last week. So Ben and I are going to sing 4 verses, which will go by more quickly than this introduction. And then we're going to open everybody's mic, and I'm going to invite everyone to sing the words on the screen. So we're going to sing these verses for you, and this is...
You have to sing this tune.
Yes. And go ahead.
And before you do that, I just want to give a little narrative, because this is also our offering time, as you have noted. And I want to say to everybody that you will be seeing some information on the screen while Ben and Brad are singing. And we understand that some people had difficulty using Give Plus, which is our online way of donation last week. We have created an email helpline, and we will put that address in the chat box, and we will also send it out by email following the service. So watch for that, watch for the information on the screen. And I would be remiss in reminding you that it is particularly at times like this that we start to understand what the importance of a congregation gathered together in love is about. And we need your support now as much and maybe more than ever before. So we hope that you will indeed be generous, whether it is by online donation or by using one of those things called envelopes and stamps. Thank you, and Ben and Brad, back to you.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. Feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
This looks like your.
Everybody sing.
So Deb is going to open up your mic so we can all hear you, and I'll give you a 3-beat count off, and we're all going to sing the words that come up on the screen. Okay, so Deb, get the words up, and I'll count off. Here we go. 1, 2, 1. We are building a new way. Are building a new way. Are building a new way.
Feeling
Stronger every day.
We are building a new way. We are indeed building a new way. And that's what the Israelites had to do once they got out of Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea, but then where were they? Wandering around in the desert, constantly doubting their leader Moses, worrying they might die of hunger or thirst. But in this context, Moses delivers the 10 Commandments. In other words, in this time of confusion and fear, they figure out how they want to be with each other. In this story, God knows that when you upset the status quo, there is space for positive change. But if you aren't proactive, things can get even worse than they were before. As Movement Generation puts it, transition is inevitable. Justice is not. And they are talking about justice and ecology. We all know the economy cannot go on like this forever, extracting more fossil fuels and expanding endlessly. Transition is inevitable. And here we are, getting a small taste of what it means for the economy to change shape. What are we going to do with it? Movement Generation suggests we work toward a just transition, and I have a slide for that. Thanks, Deb. So if it's small, don't worry. I'll be saying the words out loud too. So this would be a transition away from the extractive economy to the regenerative economy. These two models are named for their approaches to resources: extract, burn, dump versus regeneration. Their framework asks us to move from a worldview of consumerism and a colonial mindset to centering caring and sacredness, shifting from the purpose being the enclosure of wealth and power to prioritizing ecological and social well-being, changing from governance by militarism to deep democracy. I love this framework and this reminder that if we want justice, we must radically reimagine our economy. And many of us already do that, at least sometimes. Caring and sacredness. Doesn't that little symbol with the hands and the flame look a little like a flaming chalice to you? Ecological and social well-being. I know some folks who care about that. They practice deep democracy, making decisions as a community at their annual meetings. They care about regenerative energy. They share generously, not paying as consumers, but pledging as community members. Yes, I am talking about this long-standing radical little practice we call church. This radical little practice is under some pressure right now. I don't know a single faith community that isn't stressed about finances. And this is a time of transition. Whether or not it is a time of justice is up to us, up to how we choose sharing over hoarding, how we choose generosity over fear, how we continue to build and strengthen the regenerative economy while pulling our money and our power and our imagination out of the extractive economy. And one little but mighty way you can practice doing that is by pledging generously to First Parish this stewardship season, despite how uncertain all of our futures are. We know we are stronger together. And so while we listen to another piece of music, I want to ask you to be thinking and sharing in the chat, which we can save. What are some other ways that we can be creating a new economy right here, right now, in this pandemic time of transition? I invite your ideas in the chat while we move into our next piece of music.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will get there. Boom, boom, ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, 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 ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, boom. It will be hard, we know that the road will be muddy and rough, but we will get there.
I know you'll keep thinking. So I see us moving in a new way. I see us making what we need and sharing what we have. And I think that we can expand this practice beyond this time, strengthen that transition, and make it just. We have this opportunity full of loss, and it can also be a path to liberation only if we make it. We are the meaning makers. We are the ones who craft this story. Let this be another story we write that mixes loss with liberation, that finds possibility in what is hard, that creates justice out of transition. We'll turn it over to our postlude.
Cynthia, if you would, please.
When Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, away down in Egypt's land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go.
Yes, Steve. Thank you so much, Steve Sussman and Cynthia Mork, and earlier, Ben and Brad.